Good
Good
evening,
evening.
everyone.
So
Welcome
good.
to Let's Talk. I am Mike, and this is my beautiful wife,
Amy,
Amy, and we are so excited to be here
super
tonight.
excited.
Let's talk about body composition and the numbers beyond the numbers.
One of our favorites.
Yeah, this is
Super
something that
fun.
is near and dear to Amy and
Yeah.
I's hearts. And, whether you're here tonight and today is your day one on program, or if,
Congratulations,
yeah,
because it's such a
congratulations.
big step
Yep.
today.
And or maybe you're here and you've been with us for a long time. Amy and I have been living the habits of health and moved into optimization, 6 years ago. And we have continued to optimize our health. And people say, are you still following the habits of health? Absolutely,
Yes.
every day of our life.
Thank
And
goodness, right?
yes, and so we have, we've taken ourselves through all three phases. Most people come here with the initial goal of reaching an ideal weight.
Yeah.
And, then we evolve that into learning how to transition to our ideal caloric intake. And then we move into optimizing our health and really learning all six macro habits of health. So I know that in the beginning, a lot of people can, really show up here thinking that with the diet mentality,
Mhm.
right? The diet mentality, and that can be focused on the scale. And so, Amy, I know that, we have spent a lot of time working with, you know, Dr. A and the Habits Health System on evolving beyond just the scale and what that means.
Yeah, I think for a long time, I mean, the scale kind of, I don't know, you guys want to share out there too, but the scale kind of controlled my day. I think before I found Optavia in the Habits of Health, right? As I was coming in, whatever that scale said, I would either over exercise, I wouldn't eat, or I would feel my body in different ways, right? Learning the mindset was really such a big part of it.
You know, Maybe some of you will relate to this. The scale affected your decisions for the day.
Yes.
The scale maybe determined whether you got to eat today or not, right? Or how many hours you were going to exercise. And, one of the things that was very powerful for me was realizing that the scale measures weight, not self worth,
Yes. So
right?
good.
That's
Hmm.
all it is. The scale doesn't care if you put a backpack on it, a 20-pound dumbbell, or a human being. It's just this machine that measures weight. And sometimes I've heard people even say that the scale talks to them, you know? And what I've learned it the scale doesn't talk, but the voice inside our head can,
Yeah.
right? So there are a lot of things that can affect the number on the scale, right? I mean, I could just not eat and affect the number on the scale. I could drink a whole bunch of water, right? And affect the number on the scale.
So
I could go sit in a sauna and sweat a whole bunch and affect the number on the scale. I
pretty
could weigh
good.
myself in the morning, right? Or I could weigh myself at 6 o'clock at night. And that can have a profound effect on the scale, right? If I could gain many pounds throughout the course of a day if I was using the scale to control my thoughts relationship to how I weighed in the morning and how I did at 5 in the afternoon. Inflammation. Amy and I have really monitored our body in very close ways over the last, months and years. And I can go do a leg day in the gym, and it's very common for me to gain weight the next day because of the amount of inflammation and soreness I'm feeling. Or,
Mhm.
sometimes people can go have a meal that maybe isn't optimal, right? Full of pro-inflammatory trans fatty acids and processed carbohydrates and, carry a whole bunch of inflammation and water weight and affect the scale. We've had people that from stress, they're affecting the scale.
Yeah.
And,
I see sleep in there, which
yeah,
is a
not
big
sleeping.
one. Yes.
So there's lots of ways
Definitely
to affect the
affects
scale,
it.
but ultimately, what is the goal?
Yes.
Is the goal to become healthy, Is the goal to become lean and fit and strong? Or is the goal to change the scale? Right? I ask people all the time, I say, look, if you looked in the mirror and saw your ideal body image and shape, and you had the fitness level you want, you had the muscle mass you want, you were, you were, in your opinion, ideally healthy, does it really matter what the number on the scale says at that point?
Does it matter?
It depends on the person, but they
Yeah.
always say to me, no. They say, no, it
No.
doesn't really matter. Really, what I want to be is healthy and lean and strong, right? But the scale is a great way. Element 13 of the Life book, Dr. A does an amazing job
Yes.
of saying that we need a scoreboard. There has to be some sort of scoreboard to play the game, right? And in the beginning, the scale is an amazing scoreboard, right? It's a great tool to use. But eventually, as we evolve through the habits of health, we can look at things like the composition of our body.
Yeah, I love that. And element 13 is a pretty powerful element. And, it's kind of fun. You can skip around in your life book and look at different things and journal. And that's what element 13 is really about, coming in and journaling and talking about the macro habits, right? Not just focusing on the scale as you're moving through and seeing those things change. And, sometimes fluctuations happen, especially when you're measuring every day, right? When you're doing the scale every day, you'll see those differences. I do love the myth and the truth as you're doing that. And as you come into this system, you start to learn those things, right? You get to realize, yes, sometimes the coach is your reminder. Sometimes the community is your reminder to say, no, it's not all about this scale. Like, how are you feeling? What are you seeing different? And you're really hitting the wins. Dr. A even asked you that. Like, what are some of your wins that's happening since you started in element 13 and doing those things?
So, our goal this evening is that we help liberate some people from the control that maybe the scale has over them. And so we want to introduce you to one of our friends, Denise. We think that Denise has a great story that represents um, how things can affect the scale,
Yes.
right? So, Denise, we're so excited for you to share your story and just let people see how stress really played a big role in what was happening on the scale for you.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Hello, everyone. I am Denise Balbach from Ely, Minnesota. I started my health journey in September and fell in love with this program. I have dropped 82 pounds, over 50 inches, went from a BMI of 44 to 29, a size 2XL to a size 14 so far. About 6 weeks after I started, I got stuck. The scale wasn't moving. I remember reading something in my life book about stress spiking cortisol, cortisol spiking insulin, and insulin spiking, apparently for me, would shut down weight loss completely. So the next day, I was intentionally mindful of the stress levels I was having. I stopped periodically to check to see where my stress was at. I did deep breathing. I did positive affirmations, and any negative thought that popped into my head, I immediately released it, going, no, not going there. So the next morning, I weighed myself and was shocked to see the scale had dropped 2.5 pounds. So the next day, I tried that whole thing all over again. And the next day, I stepped on the scale and it was down 1.5 pounds. Element 4, becoming the dominant force in your life, and element 23, mastering your thoughts and emotions, were key to this breakthrough. Just a moment. I have to pull something up. What these elements taught me is that I get to choose and control my cortisol levels. It empowered me. Every cell in my body is under my control. What I choose to put in my body, mind, and soul controls every cell in my body, every organ. I am becoming the dominant force in my life.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
is so beautiful, Denise.
I
And it was so
think-
fun. Yeah, go
when you
ahead.
were going through that, Denise, I just remember you being very frustrated because the scale wasn't moving. And I love that you grabbed your life book. And then you saw in one day when I started doing these things, what a difference it made. And,
Yep.
you know, and that's what Dr. A talks about, right? Being that dominant force. And that's what you did. You took control, not the scale anymore. You took control and came in and said, I'm going to do these things.
But the scale was a tool
Yep. To
that
let you
allowed
know.
us to say, what do we need to look at? Right?
Yep.
What do we need to evaluate? Right? We know that the Habits Health System works. We know that the
Mhm.
nutrition program that you were on at the time, the 5-in-1,
Yes.
works,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
You were having lots of success. So what did you learn about the scale in the process of going through that experience?
It also freed me from the scale too, because it's like stepping on it every day wasn't a great choice, and kept me prisoner. Stepping on it once a week, because now there's fluctuations and stuff. Um, but using it as a tool to say, okay, what do I need to change? What is going on? Why isn't this working for me? And then finding that solution and seeing the difference in my choices on the scale was like, all right, we've got this. So it came in handy as a tool, but it also freed me from the scale going, I don't need to step on this thing every single day. Once a
Yeah.
week is good.
Do you think that you would have been able to make it through that transition if you hadn't been in your life book, reading Element
No,
4?
no.
So
Fast
um,
no.
that is, to me, the gold to this whole program is these books.
Mhm.
It's like everything else builds off of that. But if
Mhm.
you're not in your life books reading those books, you're missing you got a flat tire on your car.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, thank you so much, Denise. I know that that was powerful for so many people, and I'm so glad that you were engaged in all aspects of the program, connecting with your coach so you could find support in that moment,
Yep.
being your life book so you could start to learn about, how stress and insulin and those things were affecting you, because you really had that realization on your own. You were like, wait, I think this stress that I'm holding inside me is having an effect on my physiology and the scale.
Yeah, and I think you coming in, because sometimes when that happens and you've been standing on that scale and it's not changing, some thoughts of like, oh no, this is not going to
Yep.
work again. And then instead, you took charge. You became that dominant force and you reached out. I call them lifelines, right? You reached out to a coach, your amazing coach. You reached out to your community and you started plugging in there, and then you reached into your life book and started journaling and saying, wait, these are things I can control.
Yeah.
When other things are out of control, I can come in and control these. And then what we saw was amazing, because I think that week, was it 10 pounds you ended
Yeah.
up
And the interesting thing too is like looking back at my past history, is like Dr. A says that most weight gain and weight issues are mismanaged emotions. Well,
Yeah.
apparently, my entire life I've had mismanaged stress emotions. So now that I
You
can
and every
control
other
that and know
honest
that
person that's on this call.
yep, it's all under my control, and being able to control that is like a huge aha moment for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huge.
Thank you so much, Denise. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
you sharing with everybody tonight.
And everything
So
you
let's talk about body composition a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
Like what, these are kind of big words, body composition. What
does
does body composition mean? What is our body composed of? Well, fat, muscle, bones, water, our organs, right? And so ideally, what are we looking to do? Reduce the body fat, increase the muscle, and make sure that we have appropriate levels of water to be able to do the physiological functions that are necessary for day-to-day life and to keep ourselves hydrated and healthy. And one fact that I think is very important for us to all realize is that all of our bones weigh about the same amount.
Yes.
Whether you're a super great, big, tall, large male compared to a little petite female, all of our bones are within about 3 to 5 pounds of each other in adults. Okay. So, I know that some people have really liked the idea of being big boned, right? Now, I know nobody on this call has ever heard that or said that, but it is the truth. And the reality is our organs fall into the same category. So, really, what we have control over is the amount of fat, muscle, and water in our body, right? And so, that's the areas that we want to focus our attention, because that's really how we want to evolve this process. You see, I put on the screen there a picture of an in-body scan. And thank you for bringing that up, Chris. That's great. The in-body scan is just one, right? You can buy scales at home, and you can, I looked on Amazon, you can buy body composition scales for $30 to $50 on Amazon, or you can go to a facility that has, an in-body scanner. But in the evolution of the process of your journey, we think that it's a wise idea. Oftentimes, typically for us, is at transition with our clients that we have them go get a body composition scan.
Yeah, and we were just talking about this the last few weeks on the Let's Talk, and even on the podcast you can go back and listen to that. We kind of went into like the lean and green and getting you set up and doing those things, right? And then last week we went into the fat burn and how that looks and how do you keep yourself into fat burn. And for us, I think the next phases, like as we come into this for weight loss, that's the first phase. But our system gets to take you through those next phases to learn about health and for you and what that looks like for longevity, right? As we're building more muscle, we have the active line now. We have the aminos, which are amazing for protein synthesis and creating muscle mass, right? We have the active whey protein, which are super great for high protein to get easy, fast, convenient, I guess, as you're moving into those next phases, because your life is still busy, right? Even though you've lost the weight and coming into that next phase, we talked about that, how the new line, the Ascend line, is so easy and convenient to have with more protein.
And it leads
And
us
just
into transition,
that part,
right?
yes.
Because, at some point, right, we're going to reach the goal on the scale.
Yes.
And I really think the question for all of us at that point has to become, what's next, right?
Yes.
What's next? If I hit this number and that was all I was focused on, right? This is a typical place where people will start to struggle and start to go back the other direction. Because Dr. A calls this in the Life book conflict resolution, right? We started into this because there was a concern, right, about our weight. And then we work on that, right, to be able to fit into those jeans or hit a number on the scale. But then what? Well, if the goal really was all along to become optimally healthy and well, I would contend that most of us didn't want to lose the weight to lose the weight. We wanted to lose the weight because of how losing the weight was going to make us feel physically, emotionally, and our level of fitness, how that was going to affect our activities of daily life, what we were going to be able to do, what that was going to mean impacting us moving into the future, what quality of life we were going to experience. It really affects what we call our health span, which is really a more important number than our lifespan, right? Right now in America, there's a 16-year difference between our lifespan and our health span, which means the average person is going to spend about 16 years, the last 16 years, not in their health span, but in just their lifespan. What if we could change that? Well, that's going to that's going to require us to have a goal beyond the number on the scale. Looking at how do I increase my lean muscle mass? How do I make sure that my body fat percentage, right? The percent of my body that is fat is within a normal range, because there's a new thing on the horizon. And we're going to see a lot of this because of how people are going about weight loss. For example, we have programs to support a lot of people using the GLP-1 medications, right? In Optavia, we specifically have a GLP-1 plan because without appropriate support and appropriate nutrition, we run the risk of losing 20 to 50% of our weight in muscle. So what can happen, we can actually create something called sarcopenic obesity. What that means is that you reach the number on the scale that you wanted, but you're still obese because your percent body fat is still in a range of obesity. So that's where the amino acids, the active line, the ascend line, and why those were brought in to give us this tool to help us move from the 5 and 1 or the 4 and 2 and start to transition, right? Start the process of actually saying, okay, I reached the number on the scale. Now we can look at the composition of our body and say, what's next? Okay, it looks like I need to add lean muscle mass.
Yeah.
Right? Or, it looks like I have maybe an inflammation concern in my body, right? How can we address all these things? So what are ways, Amy, when we really started diving into looking at the composition of our body, how did that benefit you from the mindset? Because I know that the scale was something that really had an effect on your day, your weekend, your level of exercise. How did that free you from some of that?
Well, for instance, we took one today. We took an in-body scan today. And as I was looking at that, my scale actually came up a pound. But also what came in that in-body scan was my muscle mass came in more. And also my lean body mass was lower. So as I was looking at that and reading,
Your body fat percentage was lower, your
Yes,
lean
thank
muscle
you.
mass was higher.
Yes, thank you. And so that just the mindset of it really shifted into where I was in optimization and what I've been doing as we were
It gave you
moving
the
through
ability to
this.
see the scale went up a pound, but I gained a pound of muscle, right?
Yes, yes.
And so I see some conversations about BMI in the chat, and those are excellent. Let's talk about BMI for a minute because that is very, very important. So BMI is your body mass index, and your body mass index takes into consideration your height and your weight, but it does not take into consideration the amount of muscle mass. So for example, my percent body fat is very lean and well within a normal range, but my BMI shows me higher than a 25.
Yes.
And you say, well, how is that? Because the amount of muscle on my body is high enough that it takes my weight and height ratio out of that range.
Right.
So for most people, getting within a healthy BMI is a very important initial step. And there are many long-term health benefits to being within a healthy BMI. However, what can happen is as you add muscle mass and stay lean, you can actually go out of the BMI range. So that is where a body composition scan would be very helpful for you, because somebody could say, well, I don't think it's ever normal for me to be in that BMI range. Well, we could look at body composition and say, well, actually it really is, because if we look at how much muscle you actually have, if we reduce the fat to the appropriate level, you will be within a normal range, right? So these are all tools to use this. How would you use it? You can buy your own body composition scale. And again, they're plenty accurate enough for what we're doing here, which is creating optimal health and well-being. Or you can just Google InBody scanner near me and go to a gym or facility.
Yeah, I think for myself too, like moving out of the weight loss phase and into optimization and going through transition it made me in element 13 too, that Dr. A talks about. It just allowed me to come in and say, okay, what are you committed to? Where do you want to go next? now that there wasn't just a finish line of weight loss in this scale and what it said. It put me in a different perspective to
Yeah.
move through and get to where do I want to commit to, where do I want to go, and where do I want to commit to
Yes,
that.
yes.
And
And-
that
and
was the biggest change for
I
me.
saw that people were asking about the accuracy of scales.
Yeah.
You have to look at, is it accessible to people? And, what is the ultimate goal, right? There's something out there called a DEXA scan, but for most people, it's just not necessary to have the expense to go through that. So the next would be an in-body scan, something like that, would be in some kind of a facility like a gym or a doctor's office, and then an at-home scale, all of which, for what 99% of us are probably doing here, is plenty accurate to give us data points to make decisions on how we can move forward in our health.
Yes.
So, again, what's the goal? We don't want to complicate this, but we do want to liberate people from realizing that all a scale is measuring is weight. It's not telling you what percentage of that is body fat, what percentage of that is muscle, and that can be confusing, right? And when you use these tools effectively, right? So in the beginning, like Dr. A tells us, a scale and a measuring tape is an amazing tool. It is going to be extremely effective for
Yes.
most people. You do not need to go do anything beyond that. But when you're moving from, you've reached your goal weight, you're in your healthy BMI, how do I monitor moving into optimal health and well-being from here? This is where this tool really can plug in and you can see. And what you will find, because I have an in-body scan and I have done hundreds of these with people, is that most people are under-muscled, that they don't have enough skeletal muscle. And you can then know this is where I need to work. This is where introducing the amino acids, the ascend line, increasing your protein intake, resistance training, all of those things are very important to being able to move you to that next level of your health journey and to optimize your health from there.
Well, I love this question out of the chat, about should you measure by a BMI scale or by an in-body scan? In that
Either
too.
one would be great starting out. Either one. So if you would like to go have a body composition scan, that would be very helpful. However, I would say in the beginning, it's not necessary. Just looking at your height and weight would be very appropriate to getting started on the journey and moving yourself forward. But I'll give you an example. We have a new client that I believe is on this call tonight, and he joined us because his goal is he went through a health challenge recently, and it caused him to lose a significant amount of weight. The advice he was given was eat whatever you want, just gain weight. Well, he knew inside that that's not what he wanted to do. And so he has partnered up with us, not to lose weight, but to gain muscle, right? So we did do a scan on him initially, so we can show and monitor that using our active line, using amino acids, fueling our body with lean and green plus meals, that we can restore his health and help him add muscle and not just gain weight, because he could just gain fat weight, right? Which is not what he wants. He wants to gain lean muscle mass.
Yeah. And Nancy, I think that is so powerful that you're saying that your muscle mass has gone up since you're taking the EAAs, and that absolutely starts happening. And so that is a big game changer, because our EAAs are really good EAAs. I know there's a lot of them out there and that's so confusing, but they have all the correct,
They have all your
amino
in the right
acids
ratios.
and that it starts creating muscle mass. So it's not just for people that work out, right? It's for every person, right?
Yeah.
To gain healthy muscle mass as you're moving through.
So, and why is that so important? Because muscle mass and strength and grip strength, and our ability to lift our own body weight are the greatest indicators of longevity we have. So it was great spending time with you tonight.
Yes.
What an awesome conversation. Thank you for your involvement in the chat. Next week, we have another exciting episode of Let's Talk in store for you. The mental game, autopilot versus on purpose. And remember, this is all on our Let's Talk podcast. And so you can listen to this at, you know, as you're driving to work, or, you know, going for your walk, or whatever it is you're doing. So we are thrilled that you joined us again tonight. We'll see you next week for another episode of
Let's
Let's
talk.
Talk.